I do want to talk about this because I saw that there were a lot of people. When you talk about comic books and what's happening, especially with the sales, you have people that get very aggravated at this type of stuff. And it's not that they're aggravated at the news; they're aggravated at you for highlighting this.
Yeah.
And this came from Denver, which we were just in not too long ago, and they were covering the retailers and struggling sales. So I want to read some of this, and we'll talk about it. In April 2024, Comics Pro released the Comics Retailer Survey, which found a drop in retail comic book sales for 2023. Below is a portion of the survey provided to Denver 7 Comics Pro Executive Director Marco Yada Yada. Sales. 54% of retailers reported a gross sales of $300,000 or less in 2023, while 18% reported gross sales over $1 million. Overall, sales were down. The majority of comic book stores, 69%, so basically 70%, reported lower gross sales in 2023 than in 2022. A bright spot, however, is that 22% of stores reported higher sales in 2023 than in 2022.
How's that a high point?
If it's a net, I don't know how they're saying that's a high point, because well over half of them are saying that they had lower sales.
Bad news. Dave had his arm cut off. Good news. Dave found that he still had 2 legs and 1 more arm.
No, it's more of Dave. Dave got his arm cut off, but Jim and John over there.
Yeah. But Jim and John found out they had 2 arms.
Yeah, so that they had 2 arms.
It was a net win overall. Like, what?
Like what? Says sales of new comics. This is significant. Sales of new comics were down in 73% of comic shops.
Now this shocks me.
Not surprising, is it not? Says while graphic novel sales were down, which is even more significant because we know what they try to include in the graphic novel sales, were down in 65%, with a decline between 1 and 50%. Reported.
A little room for Nick Wiggle there, isn't there? A little wiggle room.
Yeah, that's a lot of wiggle room there. Says Mile High Comics here in Denver is one of the largest comic book retail stores in the country. However, it's not as high as he said. They had a drop in sales as well. So the highest, or one of the highest comic book retail stores in the country, had less as well. He said our gross sales today are less than our gross sales were when we bought this building. That just says enough, does it not? You bought the building in 2011, and your sales are down since when you got in the motherfucker. So that in itself just says there's a period of time that there's a decline. I get it. A year or two may be better or worse. Like it happens in every single industry. Like that's to be anticipated. But we can't sit up here and pretend like, over the amount of time that is. That's well over a decade that you're signifying that there's some sort of decline in sales. That's an industry-wide problem. And it says but the reason, he said, that's because we voluntarily abandoned the new comic model. They got out of that business as much as possible, which is what we kept telling people, that even when you looked at like the increases, you needed to look at the actual data, and you will find that, well, they're surviving off of Funko Pops, manga, merchandise stuff. It's not new comic books. So they're saying that they got out of that as much as possible. This is coming directly from the owner. And they focused on collector's items where we're not buying them through distributors. A man like me said that this distribution model was fucked, and there's still people telling me that, that's the way to go. I'm telling you, maybe I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. I don't know. Says we're not buying them from the publishers. We're just buying them from people. Going straight to the source. Says Rosansky has worked in comics retail for about 54 years. He believes there's a few factors, and I want to hear these. He says one reason was the core comic book readers are aging out. Also, younger comic book readers prefer to consume comics on devices rather than purchasing on physical copy. Not sure about that. I just think that yes, do they trend more digital than previous generations? Correct. But as far as what they're getting physical copies of is just not comics. It's what I have on that shelf, and it's box sets of fucking One Piece and whatever the fuck.
Yeah. And most of them just downloading it anyway from Pirate Bay.
Well, yeah, but that's not a fan anyway. Like that's the guy that's a person or that's not really interested in it. That's just like I'm interested in scanning in it. I'm interested in looking at it so I can at least be able to carry a conversation online, but they're not actually into it, right? It's not anything that they're like truly invested in. Says I don't think the comic business is in any kind of mortal danger. I do. Says, or that's what they said though. It says, or dead or anything like that. I think local comic shops are still doing a great job of delivering them. Yeah, things are down a little bit from right after COVID, but they're not doing bad.
Got nothing to do with COVID, mate.
I think that's a little delusional. That's cool. I mean, I get it though. Like, does the comic book shop, definitely one of the bigger ones, want to be the guy that says, all right, this shit is going downhill? Probably not. They don't want to be the guy that says that.
Well, they got to be careful, because if they say that, then it gives the impression to people who are potentially interested not to bother.
Yeah. So I understand that. And they talked about Fan Expo Denver, which we were at, one of the largest comic pop culture conventions in the country, and what they're buying and everything there. And they're going about an inclusive environment and all that shit nobody cares about. Nonetheless, what this story does say is what the story has been over the years, and that the enthusiasm to buy new material is no longer industry wide. It's just in pockets. It's in some independent here and there. It's in even manga's not doing as well in the West as what it was a couple of years ago. So it's a problem. And I don't think the problem gets fixed by pretending that it's not one. But I don't envision a world or a environment, culture in terms of comic books that it admits a lot of the problems were wounds or the result of wounds that were self-inflicted. But I just don't see them admitting that or wanting to come to terms with it, because that would also be damning for a lot of people. And also, and this is the reality, as the truth is, they don't want us to be right. And I'm not saying us two as individuals.
No, I know what you mean.
It's they would much rather walk around with the blinders on than concede that, well, perhaps those guys that we were calling all those names that were talking about the decline of the industry were correct.
Monsieur July, the blackface of white supremacy.
So it's interesting to get that from the ground when you see the role that obviously comic shops play in the entire industry. I've said a million times, I've done several long form videos on this, talking about how the distribution model is outdated, it's old, it's archaic, it's fucking stupid, and it doesn't make any sense. Nobody can make money off of that shit. Or it's only going to be a select few. A lot of hands in a cookie jar. So we'll see what ends up happening out of that. But I don't see the mainstream guys getting in step. I just don't see it. I don't know if they even give a shit, to be completely honest. Thanks for watching. Be sure to head over to Rippaverse.com to check out our comic book company. We have books, plenty of merchandise, and even some glorious animations from Rippaverse Studios.